We thought we were just taking a trip. Corsica, the Riviera, Provence, Loire Valley, Champagne. Simple, but somewhere between a cliffside in Corsica and a castle with more rooms than common sense. We realized this wasn't just about places, it was about contrasts, grit and glamour, farmers and royalty, silence and celebration. And one moment, in particular, changed the way we looked at all of it. We didn't expect it. Sarah definitely didn't expect it. Let's just say, by the time we reached Champagne, we weren't the same travelers who started on that island. So, come with us, because the first stop? Corsica. And that's where this story really begins. Corsica sits between France and Italy on the map, but culturally, it refuses to pick a side. It's geographically Mediterranean, politically French, and emotionally independent, which explains a lot once you start moving around the island. This is the perfect place to begin the French leg of our journey, because it still carries Italy's warmth and rhythm, but with sharper edges and deeper pauses. Corsica is mountainous by design, not accident. The island rises quickly from the sea, folding into ridges and valleys that shaped where people settled long before roads existed. Villages weren't built for convenience. They were built where there was water, shelter, defensible ground, and long sightlines. That's the first rule of Corsica. The land decides first. And if you're willing to follow it, slowly, the island pays you back generously.
Joe calls it putting the effort in. I call it the moment you round a corner. Pull over without saying anything, and just stare because the view arrived unannounced. Corsica does that constantly. 5 minutes of narrow road, and suddenly you're looking at something that feels wildly personal. Like it wasn't meant for an audience. It never feels accidental. It feels earned.
Ajaccio stretches along a wide bay on the west coast, with palm-lined promenades and warm, forgiving light. It's Corsica's capital, and the birthplace of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1769, just months after the island officially became French. That timing matters. Napoleon grew up Corsican before he became French, in a society shaped by contested authority, strong family networks, and limited resources. Those early conditions help explain his decisiveness, his impatience with resistance, and his comfort exerting control early in life. Ajaccio today works because it's balanced. You can move through it easily. Markets, museums, beaches, and cafes all within walking distance. You can walk without needing a plan. History is present, but it doesn't cloud the day.
Joe is being very restrained about Ajaccio. This is a place where mornings drift, afternoons stretch, and evenings refuse to end on schedule. You can wander the old town near Place Folk, past pastel shutters, smell citrus and cheese from the market, and realize nobody's rushing you, including yourself. Napoleon is everywhere, yes, streets, statues, museums, but once you're in the water or sitting with a coffee watching the light change, imperial history becomes background noise. Ajaccio doesn't demand attention, it rewards presence.
Calvi, in the northwest, is where Corsica starts showing off. Calmly, a fortified citadel rises above the bay, built to control both land and sea, while a long, pale beach stretches below it in full view. The geography here is doing quiet work. Mountains press close to the coast, so even when you're at sea level, the interior never disappears from sight. It creates a sense of containment. Sea, town, peaks, all visible at once. Calvi also has one of Corsica's most stable microclimates. The water warms faster in the afternoon, the winds ease predictably, and the bay remains navigable when other parts of the island don't.
Calvi Beach looks harmless. That's how it gets you. The water clarity improves as you move out, the colors deepen, and you keep going because there's no obvious moment to stop. Time stretches, nothing pulls you back, and when you finally do return, everything feels unhurried. Drinks arrive slowly, feet stay bare, and nobody asks what's next. That's when you realize Corsica isn't trying to entertain you, it's trying to reset you.
Bonifacio sits at the southern edge of Corsica, built directly into white limestone cliffs, rising nearly 100 meters above the sea. The old town is on top. The marina is below. Between them, a steep staircase carved into the cliff face allowed people to move between harbor and town without relying on exposed outer paths, essential during sieges and storms. From the water, the scale becomes clear. The cliffs are sheer, the town appears suspended, and the entrance channel forces every boat to slow and funnel inward. It's not dramatic by accident. It's defensive architecture turned vertical.
Bonifacio feels like a reward you didn't know you were earning. You arrive slightly overheated, mildly irritated by the drive, and then the breeze hits and everything recalibrates. The light here is sharp. The views are not exaggerated by the camera. You take the photo, look later, and think, no notes. That's accurate.
On the west coast, the Scandala Nature Reserve can only be accessed by boat, deliberately. This coastline is volcanic, fragile, and slow to recover once damaged. In the 20th century, overfishing and uncontrolled anchoring stripped parts of the coast faster than ecosystems could regenerate. In response, Scandala was locked down early. No fishing, no anchoring, no development. What remains is one of the Mediterranean's clearest examples of long-term conservation done properly. Cliffs rise directly from deep water, sea caves cut into dark red rock, rare bird species nest above, undisturbed.
This is swimming that sneaks up on you. Not flashy, not dramatic, just effective. There's the cold shock. The sharp little hello that makes you gasp and briefly question your life choices. Joe, of course, yelped like he'd discovered a new species of water and accused the sea of being aggressively refreshing. Then comes the stillness, the floating, that moment where your shoulders finally drop and your brain clocks out for paradise. Salt drying on your skin, sun doing that slow, golden thing it does when it knows you're not going anywhere. Corsica is very good at this, making the uncomfortable part end exactly when the good part begins. Even Joe stopped talking, which honestly might be the strongest endorsement of all.
Inland, Côte sits high in the mountains, and it matters that it does. This was the capital of the independent Corsican Republic in the 18th century under Pasquale Paoli. The citadel dominates the town, not as a monument but as a reminder. Power here came from the interior, not the coast. Côte still feels like a center rather than a stopover. Compact, walkable, and intellectually anchored, the surrounding Ristonica Valley adds context. Cold rivers, pine forests, and glacial air make it clear why Corsica's interior remained difficult to control.
Corsican food doesn't ask for permission. It arrives bold, unapologetic, and smelling like it knows your weaknesses. Wild boar that tastes like it wrestled your dinner plans to the ground. Sauces with depth. Not just flavor, but history. And cheeses? So fierce they don't melt. They declare war. This is food born from necessity. From firewood kitchens and stubborn landscapes, chestnuts show up not as decoration, but devotion. They fed entire villages when the wheat packed up and left. They don't need applause. They've already earned their legacy. And no, this isn't your twirly-topped, foam-dusted culinary theater. This is slow survival turned sacred, a plate that says, I endured, and so will you. Even Joe, ever the philosophical grazer, went quiet by the second bite. He called the boar confrontational. I called it delicious revenge.
No notes, just respectful silence and maybe a second helping for research.
Corsica feels like a secret upgrade. Harder to reach, less obvious, much better once you commit. You don't come here to tick boxes. You come here to stay longer than planned. You don't visit the French Riviera. You audition for it. This coast doesn't whisper elegance. It sings it. Through a Dior scarf, in a vintage convertible, over an Aperol spritz that definitely costs more than your hotel shampoo. The French call it La Côte d'Azur, the Azure Coast. But honestly, it should be called La Côte d'Extra, because everything here is dialed up to 11, and then asked if it can pose with better lighting. I've changed scarves 3 times today, and I'm still not sure if I'm Riviera chic or retired mime on holiday. Meanwhile, Joe's worn the same linen shirt for 4 days, and people keep calling him eccentric like it's a compliment. Everything here feels like it's being watched. By the sea, by the sun, and by someone silently judging your outfit from a cafe you didn't even know was there. Nice is where the Riviera goes to be seen. Promenade des Anglais? It's not a walk, it's a slow-motion fashion film. Hotel Negresco isn't just a hotel. It's what happens when Versailles and an art auction have a fabulous love child. Nice has perfected the art of looking relaxed while being deeply aware of who's watching. You don't sit at a cafe here. You arrange yourself. Your sunglasses are doing more work than your personality. Matisse lived here for the light. I came for the citrus gelato and stayed for the gossip. Ez is a stone village so high up your ears pop with drama. The streets twist like they're trying to lose your sense of direction. Or Joe. At the top, a cactus garden. because nothing says emotional transformation like succulents and sea views. This is where people get engaged or decide to ghost their therapist. It's also where you suddenly start thinking things like, should I live differently? Should I text my ex? Should I become someone who owns linen? Ah, yes, Monaco, where even the pigeons stroll the promenade like they've got offshore accounts. The Casino de Monte Carlo? It's not just where you gamble. It's where James Bond and Dame Judi Dench lock eyes over a martini and silently judge your credit score. Port Hercule? Floating fortresses. I saw a yacht with its own helipad. Joe squinted at it and said, "That feels a bit excessive." I reminded him he once packed a travel iron for a wrinkle-free hat. Monaco is tiny, gleaming, and not even trying to pretend money isn't the main event. It's wealth that's been dry cleaned, steam pressed, and bathed in cinematic lighting. Even the streets feel expensive. Like you should apologize to the pavement for your shoes, and then tip it for the inconvenience. Antibes is where you go when you're rich enough to be mysterious. Picasso painted here, because even he needed a break from fame, and his many, many relationships. Old Town Antibes, sea breezes, fresh markets, and the scent of unresolved French family drama. This is Riviera energy without the megaphone. No posing, no flexing, just money quietly minding its own business behind a pine tree. If the Riviera were a red carpet, this would be the flashbulb moment. Cannes doesn't care what your IMDb says. It wants to know what you're wearing and who you're sitting with. La Baoli at midnight? Models, moguls, and someone trying to get financing for a documentary about cheese. During the festival, Cannes becomes a contact sport. Everyone is networking. Everyone is pretending not to be networking. And someone, somewhere, is crying in a bathroom because they didn't get invited onto a yacht. Where villas are bigger than your career dreams, and twice as gated. It's not loud here. It's limestone chic and lavender-scented secrets. This is where the Riviera exhales. No spectacle, no hustle. Just the soft confidence of people who don't need to explain themselves. Now let's talk about the food. Because yes, it's extraordinary, and yes, you will absolutely need to sit down afterwards. Not because you're full, but because you just spent $38 on a salad that emotionally supports one very committed lettuce leaf. That leaf is thriving. You? Slightly poorer, philosophically changed. This is Mediterranean cooking turned into performance art. Olive oil so good it deserves its own lighting setup. Tomatoes that taste like they were bottled at sunset. Fish so fresh it practically asked for applause before landing on your plate. You'll eat things like bouillabaisse, pissaladière, soca, and you'll convince yourself it's simple food, while quietly calculating whether you can still afford dessert without selling a kidney. And there you are, nodding thoughtfully, saying things like, yes, the acidity is delicious. All the textures are intentional, while actually thinking, would anyone notice if I ordered fries? Answer, they would, but that doesn't stop you from asking.
The French Riviera? All stage, all spotlight. But Provence? Provence was carved by time, not tourists. This is the land of lavender, yes, but also of grit, where stone villages hold centuries and olive trees outlast empires. Today, we're going deep, because Provence isn't just a place, it's a system, one that tourists get to borrow if they know how. Let's set the scene. Provence is inland southern France, hotter, drier, more agricultural. It wasn't built to impress, it was built to endure. It's a region of hill villages perched on limestone ridges, Roman ruins integrated into everyday life coastlines where cliffs collapse into sea, and a food culture that demands your participation. If you want to love Provence, you have to move slower. Shop at the market, cook the food, smell the Mistral wind, let the rhythm set in. First stop, Aix-en-Provence. Known as the City of a Thousand Fountains, Aix grew around natural springs that still shape the city. You'll feel that rhythm walking the Cours Mirabeau, a grand promenade shaded by plane trees, edged with mansions, bookshops, and terrace cafes. But the soul of Aix is in its markets. 3 times a week, the squares fill with seasonal produce, tapenade, goat cheeses, and bouquets of herbs so fragrant you'll want to eat the air. This is also Cézanne's city. Visit his studio, trace his footsteps to Mont Sainte-Victoire, the mountain he painted again and again, chasing light and form. Tourists don't come here for big monuments. They come to imitate local life for a day or two, to browse, sip, shop, and taste. Avignon was once the seat of the Catholic Church. From 1309 to 1377, the Pope actually lived here. The Palais des Papes dominates the skyline, the largest Gothic palace in Europe, built to intimidate. Walk its halls, and you'll feel both power and paranoia in stone. Nearby, the Pont d'Avignon ends halfway across the Rhône. It's the bridge that inspired a children's song and baffled engineers ever since. In July, Avignon explodes with performance. The Festival d'Avignon transforms the city into a living stage. Cloisters become theaters, streets become scenes. And between shows, enjoy set-menu Provençal lunches, local Rhône wines, and shaded plazas where even espresso takes its time. Arles is where Provence reveals its Roman skeleton. The amphitheater here was built around 90 AD and still holds events. Sit where gladiators once stood. The acoustics remain, so does the drama. Walk a bit, and you'll find more. A Roman theater, crypto porticos, and forum remains integrated into the city grid. Then there's Van Gogh. In 14 months here, he painted over 300 works. Café Terrace at night, the Yellow House, Starry Night over the Rhône. You can still visit the cafe, the garden, even the hospital. Saturdays, one of the largest markets in Provence spills across Arles. Olives, linens, antiques, cheese, it's how the city breathes. Saint-Rémy is smaller, softer, but history runs deep. Just outside town lies Glanum, a Roman city unearthed and open. You can walk the actual streets, temples, forums, public baths. You experience it spatially, not as an abstract history statement. This is also where Van Gogh spent a year in a psychiatric clinic. Here, he painted irises, the starry night, and dozens of landscapes drawn from the fields just outside. And if you like prophecies with your pastries, Nostradamus was born here. The Luberon is what many people imagine when they dream of Provence. Gordes is the limestone star, stacked houses tumbling down the hill. Roussillon glows orange and red thanks to its ochre-rich earth. And Senonc Abbey, framed by lavender fields, is still home to Cistercian monks. Drive the loop. Taste olive oils and tapenades. Visit goat cheese farms. Sip wines from small-batch vineyards. This is Provence in its most photogenic, edible, and sun-drenched form. Marseille is France's oldest city, founded by Greeks in 600 BC. It's gritty, layered, and pulsing with energy. At the Vieux Port, fishing boats still unload the morning catch. And in kitchens nearby, that catch becomes bouillabaisse, a rich fish stew born from humble origins and perfected by generations. Nearby Cassis is calmer, more resort than port. But it's the launch pad to the Calanques, narrow inlets where limestone cliffs dive into turquoise sea. Hike them, boat through them, swim, if you dare. South of Arles lies the Camargue, a river delta that doesn't feel like Provence at all. Flamingos feed in salt flats. The Camargue horses roam freely. Black bulls are bred for local games, not the life or death kind, more the let's see who gets tired first, and then go to lunch kind. You come here to feel the landscape breathe.
All right, buckle up. Because the Loire Valley is France showing off, calmly, confidently, and with zero apology. This is not a drive-through and wave situation. This is layers on layers of history, beauty, power plays, and aristocrats being dramatic. Very beautifully. France didn't build this region for postcards. It built it to control territory, impress rivals, and keep everyone watching their manners. Joe tried to call it romantic France. I reminded him this many castles usually means someone was nervous. Often called the Garden of France, the Loire Valley stretches along the Loire River, from Angers to Orléans. And yes, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, for good reason. Castles, vineyards, Renaissance towns, royal drama, and a suspicious number of very fancy royal advisors who clearly treated interior decorating like a national emergency. Angers is where the Loire clears its throat and says, "All right, behave." This is serious France. All medieval walls and hulking fortifications. No frills, no flirting. The kind of place that doesn't do romance first. It does control. Romance can wait. Kings didn't come here for the view. They came to get away from Paris, from unrest, from religious pressure, and let's be honest, from relatives who were plotting a little too loudly. Joe called it intimidating. I said, that's just power when it's confident enough not to smile for you. Saumur is where the Loire softens. The Château de Saumur watches the river, not threatening, just aware. This is power that no longer needs to raise its voice. And this is where the vineyards enter the chat properly. Cellars carved into limestone, cool, underground, practical. The same stone that built the castles also built the caves. And the caves protected the harvest. Nothing wasted. Everything reused. Joe got emotional about this. Something about efficient architecture. I let him have the moment. Before the fairy tales really kick in, the Loire gets weird, in the best way. Entire homes carved directly into limestone cliffs, still lived in. Cool in summer, warm in winter, quietly brilliant. Joe asked if people miss windows. I asked if he misses being warm and practical at the same time. Chinon is where the Loire stops being polite. Yes, it's a famous grape-growing region, but it's also the backdrop for big arguments, bigger alliances, and the kind of power games that make group projects look relaxing. Secrets were traded here, quietly, efficiently. Royal advisors weren't just hanging around. They were collecting information like it was a competitive sport. And marriages weren't about romance. They were more like very fancy peace treaties with better outfits. The Loire looks calm because all the drama already happened, and the river has moved on. Joe said, that escalated quickly. History nodded. Then we hit Valandry. And suddenly, perfection. The gardens are mathematical, disciplined, controlled. This is the Renaissance saying, yes, nature is lovely, but we can organize it. Even the kitchen garden is strategic. Joe tried to touch a hedge. I physically stopped him. These plants have rules. Tours feels lived in, young, human, cafes, students, little bakeries that smell like happiness, ordinary evenings done exceptionally well. This is where the Loire stops performing and starts existing.
All right, here we go. Thinking caps on. When people say Champagne, they usually imagine one perfect place. Elegant, polished, effortless. But Champagne isn't one place. It's an argument that eventually learned how to wear a crown. Today, we're traveling the Champagne route in one day. No tasting crawl, no fancy swirl moves, and absolutely no pretending this was ever simple. We start deliberately in the Aube. The Aube is technically Champagne, but emotionally, it's the rebellious cousin who shows up uninvited and then turns out to be essential. In the early 1900s, this area almost lost the right to even call itself Champagne. Picture being told, your family, but maybe don't use the last name. Geographically, it's closer to Burgundy than to Reims. Stylistically, too. Pinot Noir dominates here. Bold, structured, confident. And then there's Les Riceys, 3 villages stacked together pretending to be one. Sarah once tried to explain that setup to me with diagrams. There were arrows. It did not help. The Aube reminds us that Champagne was never a single identity. It was negotiated, argued, and barely held together. From there, we move into the Côte de Cézanne. This is where the episode breathes. Mostly Chardonnay. Softer chalk, less famous, but deeply important. This is Champagne realizing that expression alone isn't enough. This is where it starts learning restraint. Think of it as the hinge in the story, the moment Champagne stops being expressive by accident and starts becoming intentional. Sarah calls this self-regulation. I call it the region taking a deep breath and counting to 10. Next stop, Côte des Blancs. This is where Champagne becomes architectural. Villages like Avize and Le Mesnil-sur-Oger sit on pure chalk, ancient seabed packed tight beneath the surface. And chalk explains everything. Drainage, heat retention, that razor-sharp tension Champagne is known for. But the real story is underground. Miles of cellars carved straight into chalk. A hidden world where time, temperature, and patience are controlled down to the smallest detail. This is where Champagne's obsession with precision begins. Champagne doesn't chase generosity, it chases control. Sarah loves this stop. She appreciates systems, rules, predictability. I once tried to reorganize her desk. I'm no longer allowed near it. Then we head to the Vallée de la Marne. This stop matters because it keeps us honest. This is Pinot Meunier territory, long dismissed, rarely celebrated, and absolutely essential. Meunier is frost-resistant, reliable, adaptable. For years, it was treated like the background character. But with climate instability, this so-called less noble grape has become strategic. Champagne survives not because it's romantic, but because it adapts. Quietly, practically. Sarah calls this resilience under pressure. I call it the friend who always shows up, even when no one claps.
Corsica was wild, raw, honest. But here's the thing. Every place after it felt different because of what we saw there. The Riviera looks glamorous until you've stood somewhere untouched. Provence feels peaceful until you've felt real isolation. The Loire looks grand until you understand ambition. And Champagne, that one surprised us most of all. Each stop changed the meaning of the next. So if you think this was just about beaches and castles, you're going to want to see what happens when glamour meets reality on the French Riviera. Trust me. Next episode, everything shifts. I'll see you there.